Thanks for joining. We're going to go through some tips and tricks for Toolpath today. So we're excited to work with the group and show you some of our pro tips. So first thing I wanted to share in Toolpath is the new projects page. This is a pretty recent update. And, we had a lot of requests about organizing work. And this is kind of our first release of the new design. So you can search up here for project or part names. You can quickly filter by tags or who uploaded the part. And you can see, I've got my work organized generally by customer, and then I use my tags to kind of indicate the status of the job. Over on the right-hand side here, you can switch between the views. So I generally prefer the card, but the list is nice if I have like big RFQs with lots of parts coming in. And you can manage your tags over here and select the colors, all that good stuff. So let's get into looking at a part. And what I want to do today is kind of take you through some of the tips for really understanding the toolpath results and things to watch for as you're getting started and you're learning to trust and read the results. So first thing I want to show is when we have a part like this, we have some unmachinable features on it. And we get a long list of these over here. And of course, we could click into the details and get more information. Something I noticed with this part is I can't really see these holes it's flagging. Toolpath is really good at flagging like internal geometry, things like these tight holes. If there's like a, undercut for a seat for a seal or something in a feature, they can be hard to see just from navigating around the part. So something I use all the time is this isolate feature option. This will turn the part into wireframe and highlight the feature so we can figure out right away that this is a hole I'm going to need to talk to the designer about. There's no way I can cut this on my mill, right? Another tip to quickly navigate the part is in the toolbar here in the mouse over option. I recommend checking out the toolbar, playing with all the options. You'll find some nice Easter eggs like our very important banana for scale feature. But mouse over is probably the one I use the most often. And we'll see when I've enabled mouse over, I can hover over any of the features. I'll see if it's red, it's not machinable. If it's green, it is, and it'll tell me the type of feature. So that actually helps me catch that this is a T-slot and not something with just a weird visualization on the chamfer or the edge. I can also use mouse over to click into features. So I can get the details on this pocket very quickly by doing that without having to scroll through the list. Once I'm in a feature, really what I'm thinking about a lot is tool selection, especially with a non-machinable feature like this. So in the upper right here, we can get, some information about the feature that can help with tool selection. The other thing is we can see our closest match tool down here. And if I click this magnifying glass, I can actually see the list of tools and why they could or could not be used. So if I search for that closest match, I can see very quickly, okay, my 1/8" end mill would work, but I don't have the required stick out for this feature. Another trick as you get started on understanding tool selection, or if you bring in your library and Toolpath can't find a tool, is our default cut config is a pretty large tool library. It's got about 600 tools. There's some long reach stuff in there. So I'll actually just run the part against the default tool library. And then again, I can go to mouse over, go right into those features. And if I click on the name of the tool, I can see all the tool geometry that I need to cut that feature. So that's a couple tricks for kind of navigating the part and understanding Toolpath's DFM capabilities and results. After that, as you're getting started, you're going to want to check the setups. You're going to want to check the tool selection. We're going to get further into tool selection later on today. But something I want you to be aware of as you're looking through the results, getting started, is really checking the strategy tab. and making sure that the cutting parameters that we're using either in the default tool library or set up in your tool library through pre-tool are a close match to what you actually run at the shop. Tim, do you want to talk a little bit about where our cutting parameters come from?
Yeah, it's pretty basic. We did if you want to get super geeky, we did a Chips and Tips podcast a little bit that went in, not a little bit, that went into more detail about cutting parameters, kind of the thinking behind, what we did in pre-tool. For now, it's literally a starting point for different materials that came from my 25 years of machining experience. It essentially takes, helps you categorize a family of tools and then applies cutting parameters in a linear fashion. It kind of has a breakover point. To be honest, they're more suited for my VF2SS that I have in my garage than any other machine, but it's a good place to start.
Yep. And just a reminder, the default cut config has speeds and feeds set up for aluminum. So as you get started, you want to make sure that Toolpath is running at around the same parameters that you are. So worth coming into the strategy tab and expanding these operations to see what parameters are being used. After checking the cutting parameters, you'll want to move over to the estimate. And as you get started here, the key is setting up your estimate preset. So we get to the estimate preset with the manage presets fly out button in the upper left here. And the way I think about estimate presets is they're kind of our baseline shop rates. So we're going to enter our base cost, stock cost per cubic inch, flat rate cost per setup, cost per machining minute, and tool change time. And that's going to give us a baseline. And what we've found is no two parts are the same, no two setups are the same, no two shops are the same. So on the left here is really where you can tweak that in. So if you know setup 4 is going to be a longer setup for this part, you can enter that value and adjust. So what I recommend doing really to get started with estimate presets and dialing in the estimate page results is take a couple parts that you've run before that you feel like you have a good price on, play with those presets to get close, and then actually think through some of your setup times that you ended up doing on that part. And you'll find that, as you run that, run some other parts, you may find you need to adjust a little bit because the strategy is a little different, but it'll kind of help you get your footing as a baseline. So yeah, a couple tricks and tips for just starting to read these reports and things to look at in the beginning. Just to summarize, use your toolbar. I use mouse over all the time. If you're having trouble finding features, that zoom to feature and isolate feature is great. In terms of tool selection, don't hesitate to get into tool interrogation, verify why or why not Toolpath can use your tools. And then in the strategy and estimate tab, the game in the beginning is really making sure that we're running close to you and getting those estimate values in and starting to build that baseline. So what we'll get into now is some of the details on tool library setup. So when we bring a tool library into Toolpath, our goal with that library is to create what we call a cut config. And what we do in a cut config is we select our libraries that Toolpath can pull tools from. We can do some prioritization on the libraries. And then we match our presets, which is our saved cutting parameter, feed and speed data, to the different types of machining operations that Toolpath uses when it programs a part. So to get this started, we need a tool library with presets, right? So tool libraries right now come from Fusion. And let's have a look. I've got this smaller brother library. I actually stole this from Ben and Justin. This is the brother core tool library in the shop in Ohio. And I've got my tools set up, all my geometry is good in here, but we can see down here under cutting data, I only have the default preset on all these tools. And this is an example of a preset. So Fusion allows us to save different cutting data to a tool. So in this example with this rougher tool, I have, my preset speeds and feeds for favorite roughing, adaptive roughing, and bore roughing. So that's our goal. We need to get presets on this library. So first thing I'm going to do is export this from Fusion. And I'm just going to call this live brother.
Maybe while that's popping up, Paul, I think some people are using Toolpath that aren't Fusion users. And maybe
Oh,
talk
yeah.
about the concept of tool presets. And you touched on it a little bit there, but I think the main thing is that you can add multiple presets to a tool, right?
Yep. So with this 1/8" end mill, I allow this to do almost any type of machining operation an end mill can do, but I use different parameters for those different operations. So my adaptive roughing is different step down, different step over, different feed per tooth than my traditional roughing. So what presets allow us to do is to save that all on a single tool so we're not dealing with duplicate tools with different parameters to use in different situations. So yeah, I'm a big fan of the presets in Fusion, and guess what? Everyone on this call is going to need to get up and running with Toolpath, and we'll go through that shortly. So.
Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
Yep. Oh, another thing I should mention there is, if you're at a spot where you don't have a Fusion tool library, a couple tricks to that. One, pull open some of your old files that you've programmed because it saves the document library, so you can pull tools and you've probably made edits on some of those. The other thing is don't forget to have a look through these vendor libraries in Fusion. These can be really helpful if you need to build out that initial library. So I exported that library and now I can upload it in Toolpath. And we'll see, brings in the tools, still no presets on these. So what I'm going to do is click this kebab icon over to the right and go edit and pre-tool. And what pre-tool is our site to make creating this list of cutting presets quick and easy. So this library I use mainly for aluminum. So I'm going to start out with aluminum here, and max spindle speed on the Brother is 16,000, so I can enter that. And we'll see that that creates a list of presets for every tool in this library. Now, because these presets are going to be applied in our cut config and really define what operations a tool can be used for, this is where I want to stop and look at some things. So the first thing I see is this is my finishing tool. Well, I don't want to use that for roughing, right? So I can come in here and I can delete all those roughing presets. And that means that Toolpath will only see this tool as a viable option for bore finish, wall finish, floor finish. Uh,
Were you just pressing delete then when you were deleting those presets, like delete on your keyboard?
I was, yeah. Or you could use the trash icon in the upper right.
Okay.
So like for example, we have a top hat tool in this library. So I think for this, I'm gonna want to basically delete everything except for adaptive rough and debatably face finish. So I could go through the library, make any of those changes. Of course, for our rougher, we only want the roughing preset, so we remove these finishing. When I'm done with that, I can save this, and this is going to save the result right back to Toolpath. So now that I have that tool library in and I've got my presets applied appropriately, I need to create our cut config. So I'm going to come in here, create a cut config. I can select my live brother library. These are going to be my preferred tools because these are the tools that like live in the tool changer at my machine. I've already set up my non-ferrous common library, so that's going to be my standard tool library. And I'm going to go ahead and set up my drill index as a backup library. That'll autofill some of these presets, so we want to come in and just remove any that aren't for aluminum, because that's what I'm going to set up right now. So there we go. Let's call this live brother. I actually don't have face rough in this one, but let's put in face finish here. And this list of presets is actually a second layer of prioritization. So what that means is when Toolpath sees the need for face roughing, it's going to start by looking at my preferred library, look for a tool with the first preset in this list. In this case, I fudged it with face finish here. And then if it can't find a tool that will fit, it'll go to the adaptive rough preset before starting to look at my standard library. Just to show, the other thing I want to do here is I stole my drill library from Fusion, and I know that they have a slightly different naming convention. So I'm going to prioritize my drilling speeds and feeds from the Fusion default library here by applying this preset. So now I want to save that cut config. Just to show it, I'm going to save us all some generation time. So this is where I created it. And actually here I do have the face rough over adaptive rough, right? So now if I look at a part, we can run it against that Brother Speedio cut config. And let's have a look at the tool selection results. So Tim, Ben, and Scott, you're going to be in the shop making this part. Any feedback on kind of the tool selection that Toolpath gave us here?
Yeah, I do like to start, especially with aluminum parts like this. I like to start off with a face mill right across the top. Is there a way can you show how to control that?
So Tim wants to add a tool, specifically a face mill. Ben, what's on your mind?
You don't have my favorite tool in there, which
Oh,
it's a Frasia rougher tool.
yeah, we can do that. And Scott, what's on your mind?
Um, I happen to know that those bores have a precision tolerance, so drilling them's not going to be adequate. So I just want to bore mill them with an end mill.
Cool. Everything?
Yeah, all of them. Why
Nice.
not?
All right.
I'm
So,
an awkward engineer.
yeah.
I want all the tolerances.
All right, so from our first pass at that cut config, Tim wants to add a face mill. Ben wants to add, basically prioritize his favorite roughing tool, and that could be one tool or a group of tools. And Scott wants to choose to bore instead of drill. So one thing we could do is we could go over to our summary tab, and if we hit edit here, we can do manual tool selection, and we could just search through this list and find the tools that we want to use, recalculate the part, and get to it. But I think for at least Tim and Ben's requests here, I want to make some edits to the cut config because I want Toolpath not just for this part, but for every part to be able to use Tim's face mill. And Ben's going to be much happier with me if I always force us to use that Fraser rougher, right? So let's get into how to do that. First thing we can do is to make these edits, we're going to need to bring our tool library into Fusion. And because we, created those presets right in pre-tool and brought this, back into Toolpath, we don't have a copy of the library with those presets in Fusion yet. So easy enough. I'm going to come to the libraries page and download the tool library. And if I go to my Fusion library, I can import that library and then I can edit it. It'll have all the presets. I've already got a copy in here. So the first thing for Ben was he wants to prioritize this Fraser rougher whenever he can. And I can see actually here that Top Hat tool is a 1/2 inch tool and this is a 3/8 inch, which is probably why Toolpath chose it initially. So what I've done with Ben's tool here is I just added a favorite rougher preset with his cutting parameters. So I customized it a little bit from the adaptive roughing preset we got from pre-tool. The way to do this is if you open up a tool, you can edit a tool, and all these presets just live in the cutting data tab. So you can add a name, favorite rougher, can't type today, so good thing I already did it. Yeah, so when we accept that, tool's got these new parameters on it and we're good there. Tim wanted to add a face mill, and this is a common question I get is how do I add like one tool? Because when we applied those presets, we took the full library. We don't want to be, filtering down the library, trying to apply presets to just one tool all the time. So what I do in this scenario is I'll go over to this library just because I know I have a face mill in here. And I'm going to copy this tool. And I could bring this right into the library and, manually create a preset and match my naming convention to pre-tool. But what I actually want to do is just run it through pre-tool quickly to get those presets. So again, copy. I'm going to go back into my web browser and I'm just going to open up a new tab for pre-tool. And something that's nice for this is we can use the paste from clipboard workflow. So I can paste that tool right in, generate my cutting parameters for aluminum, and export it with copy to clipboard. And now in Fusion tool library, I can just use this paste from spreadsheet to bring that tool in with the appropriate presets. So I'll delete that copy I made earlier.
So I guess that using copy and paste means that you can like splice together multiple tool libraries effectively, whereas if you're import export, it'll be creating new libraries all the time. Is that right?
Yeah, this is kind of a trick to just easily add that one tool in. And, you can filter down by types of tools. We could search for face and apply here. But this just saves me basically one back and forth with Fusion and pre-tool. Okay, so I've got my face mill. I've got my presets figured out on Ben's favorite rougher. And I'm not going to worry about Scott's drills because I still want to have them in the library at this point, right? So now what I can do is export this library. I'll do it, yeah. And back in Toolpath, what I want to do instead of creating a new tool library and bringing it in is I actually just want to replace that tool library we created earlier. So this will update the library. I can grab that and we'll see 11 tools and now we have that face mill in here. And if we look at Ben's Frasia tool, actually, we see the presets that we just applied there. So if all we had done was added the face mill, we'd be good to go because this already has, well, actually, in this case, we wouldn't be good to go. I need to add the face rough. Where'd that go? There it is. So Tim's all set. We've added the face rough preset in. Ben wants his favorite rougher tool for adaptive roughing all the time. So I can bring this to the top of the list, meaning that tool is going to be top priority anytime Toolpath sees the need for an adaptive roughing operation. And for Scott, what I could do is remove all the drilling in the cut config. That would force it to bore. It would essentially tell Toolpath, hey, you don't have any drills available, so you have to bore for these. But I still want my default behavior with this cut config to include drilling. So I'm going to leave it as is for now. So when I save that, now we can come back to the part and let's look at that result. So now we get 7 tools, and we have the drills still and a spot drill involved with that. But we get Tim's face mill, and now we get Ben's Fraser rougher roughing everything on the part. So everyone's happy except for Scott, which is okay. We've still got him. So with Scott, I can come to our summary tab here. And you know, these drills are really an example of something that I want to do at the part level rather than at the cut config level is, you know, my default behavior. So then I can come in, edit environment in the summary tab, and then actually if I just disable those two drills and recalculate, I think we'll get what Scott wants with the boring here. There we go. So now we're boring. We can see it's smart enough. It got rid of the spot drill. And because these are 3/8 inch diameter, it knows it needs to pull a smaller tool. It is using a 3/8 inch and the 1/4. It's because they're in different setups. So it knows it can rough this setup quicker with the 3/8 inch. Whereas this one, it does everything, or sorry, it knows it can finish it quicker with the 3/8 inch. Whereas this one, it knows it already is using the 1/4 inch tool to get in the holes, so it groups everything. If we wanted to further refine that, we could come into summary and just remove that 3/8 inch tool, and that would force it to do everything finishing with the 1/4 inch. So that's an example of kind of how we can look at our preferences that we want to capture in a cut config. So in that case, it was Tim, you know, generally using the facing mill and Ben wanting to prioritize his roughing tools versus something that we want to address at the part level, which would be for this specific part, we want to bore instead of drill. You guys happy with the results now?
I'm stoked.
Good, excellent. That's what I like to hear. So,
Looking good.
and yeah, you know, just to show that we're not going to get too far into the CAM automation side today, but of course, if we're using these tools, these are the tools that we're going to get it in the program. So if I come over to Fusion and import the program, we'll see that in the document library. And of course, we'll see, you know, facing operation, boring operation, all of that good stuff.